is happening. Let me just tell you about a slight change to the panel, because we were obviously hoping to have someone from hard rock here, but
No.
Unfortunately...
I'm the kind of hard rock person. I mean, an actual, current, I'm the past hard rock person.
So we were very lucky to persuade Mario to join us from Vapiano, because I wanted you to have two different brands to get a better breadth of experience. We've got Brian Johnston from Wagamama, we've got Mario Bauer from Vapiano, and we have Val Brown, who's a very experienced consultant in the F&B industry from New York. And we are going to talk about internationalization very broadly in a panel structure. Oops. So as our first question, we were going to start with the basics. So we're going to start with structure. Let's talk about the type of structure that lends itself to international expansion. Very, very roughly, we all know you can franchise, and this local market is a huge market for franchising. You can go into joint ventures, and we'll ask our panelists about experience with that. You can do it yourself. You can set up your own stores. Not all countries will permit that, but in a lot of countries that is an option, but then it's at your risk. Or maybe you can go and buy out a local chain and convert. Maybe that's another option. So let's just hear from our panelists their views on those structures. Brian, what's your experience? What structures do you use at Wagamama?
Well, as Wagamama today, we operate under two structures. We have our own company-owned restaurants, which is situated in the United Kingdom, but also in the United States. And the rest of the world, we operate on national franchise basis. So we have 14 different franchisees operating in 14 different countries, spreading from Dublin in the Republic of Ireland all the way over to New Zealand. And I think going forward, we are primarily going to focus on the franchise route as far as our future international expansion is at this moment in time.
But you also have your own stores?
We have our own stores in the UK and in the United States. The UK is exclusively franchised and will continue to be, is exclusively company and will continue to be exclusively company. I think in the US, once we've got a platform established of company operations, we will then also look to start franchising in the US, but that's not for today.
Moving on to Mario, maybe, and I'll let you finish, Val. What's the Vapiano strategy? From what I see, is also mainly franchising, but I think I did hear you say that there are joint ventures in the mix.
Yeah, I think we changed our approach, because obviously in the beginning, when you have a startup and when you have a young company, you don't have so much money to grow corporate around the world. So as a lot of concepts, we took the franchise approach, and it was definitely the right one, because I think what you need to have when you go international, you need to have entrepreneurs. And it's difficult to find in the corporate world, because you don't put in the sweat and you don't put in the energy when you have your own money in there. So in the beginning, it was purely franchising outside of Germany. We bought back a lot of franchising now, so Germany became mainly corporate, as well as Austria, UK, US, China, and Spain. So that's our corporate countries. But we believe a lot also in joint venture. So when we have a big country, let's say Brazil, France, Australia, we're doing 50-50 joint venture, whereas the local partner makes the call. So the local partner has the network, has the operational experience, and he's the guy on the ground who makes the call. We're just supporting financially and from a strategic point of view in the board. We are running right now 33 countries. As I said, 6 of them we're doing corporate, 7 we're doing joint venture, and all the other 20s we are doing franchising. But we believe in one franchise partner per country, so we don't mix within a country. We really think it's important to have one partner in the country who can make the call and who can set up the strategy on pricing and brand positioning for the whole country. I think it's a big risk to mix partners within one country.
What's your experience, Val?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, we were a single unit restaurant in a city. We weren't multiple units in a city, which somewhat influenced our strategy. And the upside was so big for us. You know, I mean, the New York Hard Rock in the mid-'80s was making $15 million a year, you know. And a lot of that was merchandise, which was such a highly profitable part of the business. And so any place where we could own and operate without too much difficulty, we chose to do that. And our first move, of course, they started in London, but then we were in New York. Our first move was into Western Europe, and we owned and operated most of those locations, and then franchised in places where culturally or language-wise it was just too difficult for us to do. But, you know, we were able to, you know, to own ourselves in a lot of countries because we didn't have to set up an enormous infrastructure to support, you know, 100 units across the country. It was 1 or 2 big cities in a market. So that's how we went about it.
And then that's quite common that people look at certain markets to make them corporate and other markets to make them franchise. So I would say from what I see in my practice, there are companies for whom franchise is a bad word and you really have to persuade them that strategically to be in certain markets they have to go the franchise way. And then other companies like Vapiano and Wagamama where franchising is the main strategy. And the other structure is the exemption. So I guess for people here in the audience, if you're seeking to partner with a brand, that would be important to find out at the outset, whether they're open to franchise or whether you have a struggle to persuade them that franchising would work for them. So in terms of going into a new market, whether by franchise or some other structure, we've heard earlier already on some of the other panels that your flexibility to localize a concept is going to be very important, even if you don't franchise. And you know, if you franchise, you have the franchisee asking, this doesn't sell, my customers don't like this, my staff don't understand that, they'll push you to localize. If you go on your own, you'll still learn through your mistakes and through what sells and doesn't sell, that changes are needed. So we want to talk a little bit about levels of local adaptation. What's it like in Wagamama, Brian? It's the noodle menu and that's it? Or do you make some changes to that when you go into different countries?
I think me personally and where we're educating the rest of the organization, I think we work on in essence, an 80-20 rule. And 80% is usually pretty good. And whilst we're not going to offer 20% up for localization, we will keep a level of flexibility, be that in the restaurant design and interior. Wagamama has this quite restrictive seating structure, which doesn't work in every market. So we've been able to bring some flex and some adaptation to our seating environment. Some of our restaurants are considered to be rather cold and uninviting, which maybe work in certain countries, doesn't work in other countries, so we're showing a little bit of flexibility around that. There are probably areas which we say are mandatory, hands-off, can't be touched, areas which are highly, highly, highly recommended, and some areas which are considered to be variable. And that covers across all the categories, the facility, be it also some of the menu. We've added some flexibility into some of the countries as far as menu is concerned as well. So I think that 80-20 gives us a good balance. We keep 80% is good. There's nothing wrong with 80%. That 20% gives us that flexibility to be adaptable locally.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because if you go beyond maybe 20%, if you go to, let's say, 50-50, is that still a Wagamama restaurant?
I think
is that just suddenly some kind of modern fusion noodle concept with a name on the door?
I think you'll have lost it.
Yes.
You'll have lost it. And it's all about maintaining control and keeping that integrity of those core elements that make your brand and come together with your brand.
What's your experience, Val, the level that you can make changes without losing the brand identity?
Well, it's it's kind of, it was a process for us, because I think we started because we were so much about our brand and our logo, and I think everybody thought of brand as logo back then, but really a brand is the sum of the consumer's experience of every part of your brand. So we had to really clearly define that before we started growing, particularly for partners and franchises, so that every decision about localization could be made within that kind of framework. And I was talking to Erin last night about I actually went to the Hard Rock. I'm always kind of checking up on them. And, the menu really hasn't changed much since I was there, which is a while ago now. And I was like, oh, I wish there were healthier things. And he said, but it's about indulgence. And, and actually, you could localize an item in a different market for the Hard Rock by making something local to that market, but that is indulgent. That was a way to do it. But, when I go into a market, for all international development, I have a motto, and that is assume nothing. Go in and research and really understand how the people live and how they eat. And, we made a lot of mistakes. But, there were easy things for us to change because we have, musical instruments on the wall. We could feature German or French wherever we were artists. We could play some of their music. So that stuff was easy. I mean, one of the challenges Hard Rock has, I would say in the United States, and in many places it's primarily tourist-driven now. But a lot, we moved into Western Europe, we had locals, curious locals, rock fans, and we also had a lot of tourists. So, our local people that we had hired and the diners who came said, your portions are like huge, and American portions are huge. And that was a big decision for us because we had two types of consumer to cater to. And the decision actually was to keep the portions the same. And I know that still, I was speaking to some franchisees lately, and they still have an issue with it. They still kind of fight with the head office about it. But, but there are other things that were, easier to do, and that, as an American, and I don't think we came in as the ugly American, which can happen with the U.S. business, but there were just things we didn't realize. We didn't come from a cafe culture in the United States, and the Paris Hard Rock had no outdoor seating, and we were just empty in the summertime. So we got a permit, fortunately we could, start outdoor seating. And, there were just things we weren't used to. We did 4 table turns at lunch in New York, during a busy season. And there were 1.5 in Paris. And we were like, but the check averages were much bigger because they served 3 courses in Paris, So there's a lot of things that we didn't think about. We didn't know what we didn't know. So you kind of do as much as you can now, and of course, this was 25 years ago when we started. There was so much more information out there. There was no internet then, so it's so much more global now. You can find out a lot before you start.
Of course, in an ideal world, you research all of that in advance and you adapt your concept. But I think what happens in practice is there isn't the time, there isn't always the resource, and maybe not the willingness on day one to make so many changes. Maybe it's like, hey, let's see, they'll start loving our stuff. So Mario was telling some interesting stories at his round table about some of the experiences you've had with Vapiano around surprising features of your concept that suddenly wouldn't work without a few tweaks. So maybe you share some of those stories.
The summary of our panel was going abroad without losing the soul, and I think that's very important because they come to Wagamama or to Hard Rock or to Vapiano because they want to experience what we are good in serving. And for us, it's a fresh pasta. So a lot of franchise partners, let's here in the region, they say, okay, let's serve some hummus as appetizer. But this is kind of stupid to do that because we cannot serve the best hummus in the country to our guests. So why should we touch that? And the same is true in Mexico when they force us to serve certain products. So I think we should serve what we're good in and what the brand stands for. I think the local adoption shouldn't be so much about the food itself, because the food itself should be true towards the roots of the brand is, but the concept should adopt itself to cultural needs, and that's more on the design issue, that's more on how you fit out the store. I gave before an example that's very simple. It's the sizes of the table and the chairs, because we build our stores focused on a German mind. And when we went to Mexico, we had huge problems because our furniture had been too big, and that's quite obvious mistake, but we made it. And I think a lot of concepts, especially from America, who enter Mexico, make the same mistake. And also the table, we have similar iconic table as Wagamama. They have also big tables, and in some cultures, the French partner come to us and say, look, people don't want to share the table here. But I think it's very important to try out and start as purely as possible towards the brand. Because if we're talking about the core values of Vapiano, it's about freshness. Therefore, you have to have your individual cook. And it's about price value. So by making people queuing and waiting 5-10 minutes until the chef is cooking for them, they will get fresh food and they will get it cheaper as in a normal restaurant. Well, there's the 2 core values of Vapiano. So by taking that away, we harm 2 core values, what we don't like to harm, and then we're not what we like to be, because we don't call ourselves restaurant, because we don't want to be a restaurant. We don't take reservation, we don't want to have tables for 2, we don't want to have all these things what a normal restaurant have. And I think it's all about picking the right partner, because if you have a partner who understands the local culture, but who also understands and buying into the values of the brand, then it will not be this tricky discussion all the time what to change. And that's why I think it's very important, this dating phase, as I call it, with the partner. And we normally take from the first call till somebody signs the contract, we have between 8 and 12 months time. So it really takes a long time to pick the right partners. And even if you grow more slowly, it's worth to take the time, go to the country, visit them. We made a lot of mistakes in the early beginning because we grow like that. We opened 33 countries in 12 years, what is crazy with 158 restaurants only. And we learned our lessons. And now the next countries we're going to open, and we just opened in Chile a week ago, this contract was signed 2 years ago. So it takes some time to develop that, and I think that's the healthy growth we all want to see.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I think one sees that a lot, particularly if there's a new phenomenon on the market, a new approach to dining, like you had with Vapiano, that you get a lot of interest, maybe even unsolicited interest. Somebody eats in your restaurant, they go, wow, I'd love to take that to my country, everyone I know loves this, and they will opportunistically approach brands and ask, typically for a franchise, sometimes for a joint venture, which sort of leads us to one of the tricky questions in franchising. How do you pick your market? When is the right time to go into a new market? Do you have a strategy and you work along very, technically? No, this is not a core strategy. Thanks for your interest. Calling in 5 years' time. You miss some amazing opportunities if you work like that. How do you do that, Brian?
Well, again, I think looking back in the mirror of Wagamama, when you see us spread, we're a mile wide and an inch deep in our geographic spread from Dublin to Auckland, with effectively 22 restaurants in the middle. That is, I think Wagamama in the past was a reluctant, accidental franchisor, was probably flattered by receiving these inquiries, receiving these requests, and felt, well, in one respect, why not? I think the way that we're approaching it today is to have a look inside, look at ourselves. Are we fit for purpose? Can we do it? Is the whole organization set up to do it? Define what we believe a franchisee is and what a franchisee should be, and what are the key characteristics that we look for within a franchise partner going forward, and making sure that there are some key skills and attributes available that actually fit for purpose. And then be fairly brutal with yourself to say, right, these are the territories, this is the limit that I'm going to stretch my organization to. This is the territory that I can actually, A, I can support, but B, has got the growth potential there for me. So really quite a lot of desk work, a bit of theory, a bit of inward soul searching, looking at yourself to say, right, okay, we are fit for purpose. These are the type of characters and the individuals or the companies that we want to work with, that can work with us, and this is the territory that we want to go to.
Yeah, that's really, I think, an important feature. Now, no, Val, you work, obviously have worked at Hard Rock and gathered a lot of experience now, but now also work with brands and help them think about their strategy. Yeah. And maybe that may even sometimes involve saying, guys, you're not ready.
Well, I have a client like that right now. Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, first of all, somebody asked me during that interview at the break, should you, when you're developing a business, is it to be franchised? And I said, well, if it's a fast casual, depending on the segment, that would be nice. That can be part of your vision, but, and it can be a scalable concept. But just focus on that one unit that you're doing first, you know, and then your second unit. And don't be thinking about your IPO when you start your first restaurant. I mean, that's one thing I would say. And then, you know, I have this client that it's been around for a long time. It's a, you know, kind of a heritage brand, and they want to start licensing. And they don't want to franchise, they want to license because it's actually, they don't have a food operation in their business. They don't have the room to. And because my, you know, first background was in branding and marketing, I'm really insistent that it be a franchise because I want us to have as much control over it as we can because it's an important brand. And I think one of the reasons they don't want to franchise is because they don't want to build the infrastructure that they need to franchise properly. And I said, well, even if you license, you have to have a little infrastructure here, you know. And they're not guys who grew up in the industry, they're guys who bought into the industry. And so it's been a real education process for me as well. And it's difficult, you know, for me to kind of balance that. So it's kind of slowly as she goes. And they seem not to be in a great hurry. But I'm trying to do, you know, they've been operating without a business plan. They've, you know, not done some basic things. So that's kind of the beginning of the process for us.
And this, I think, can be a danger when someone has a cool new concept and you divert your resource away from, you know, basically consolidating what you've got into supporting franchisees
and not having the talent.
Yeah.
You have to have the talent.
So, question for you, Mario, was it conceived as a franchise, or did it start as a corporate chain and then you got so many franchise offers, a bit like Wagamama, that you thought, well, we might as well start franchising?
No, I think you have to have a strong commitment to franchising if you want to do that, and we had that from early beginning. And I think that's the most important thing up to the shareholders. They want to share and they want to become franchisor. Because a lot of brands just see the nice royalties floating in and you think, oh, right, a manual, I sent the contract, they sign, and we get monthly the royalties. It's not like that. I think you have to have a true commitment to share. You have to have a true commitment to listen, because you're not signing a contract with an employee, you're signing a contract with a partner who is nearly equal to you, so you should listen and you should be open to share. And I think that's a strong cultural approach. And the next thing is you really have to choose the franchise partners carefully. So we never sat in front of the map and say, oh, strategically it would be very nice to go to Belgium. We're still not in Belgium. It's quite obvious that we should be there, but we are not, because not the right partners have approached us. But we are in Mexico, what doesn't make any sense, or in Chile, because there are people who came to us who love the brand, who are dedicated, and who live and stand for all the core values what we have. And if it's the right partner, I think you can go with the partner everywhere. We're in Azerbaijan. Do we need to be in Azerbaijan? No, not at all. But the partner that lives the brand, loves it, and then we go there. And I think you really have to handpick the partners carefully, because you will have troubles on the road and there will be tough times. And if you don't have a mutual understanding, and if you don't appreciate each other and even like each other, you will never overcome all these hurdles. And then if you have the wrong partner in Chile or Australia, you're really fucked, because it's the other end of the world. It takes you 2 days to travel there. So if you make this mistake once, the damage is done. So it feels like being married to 33 countries, because you go all the up and downs with them. And it's, even the contract says he's responsible for all the losses and he gets the profit and you get the royalties. At the end of the day, you're in bed with them, because if they don't make money, they will cheat on the brand, they will cheat on the quality, they will do a lower food cost because they will cheat on the ingredients. At the end of the day, he has to make substantial profit. Otherwise, you suffer together with them. So it's a nice concept to say, we're the strong franchisor, we tell you what to do and you just follow the contract. It's nice, but it's not reality.
Okay, quite a lot of interesting lessons there. I think the first one is, are you going to franchise at all? Is your brand suitable for it? I've heard views that fine dining you cannot franchise it. Fast food, we all know you can, with a lot of success. And then there's a space in the middle where some people think they can and other people think they can't. Then you have the question of, are you ready? Then you have the question of target markets, and then you have the wonderful question of how to find the right partner. And that's, of course, the key to success in international franchising. So I was going to ask our panel, what do you look for in a partner? Do you, when the guy walks into the room, do you know he's the right one? What are your criteria? How do you select them?
Background check.
That's an American answer.
I mean, you have to be careful about, this same client we're talking about is very opportunistic. They get somebody in China calling and they're like, oh my God, they want us in China. And, they may not be the right partner for them. So you really, you have to spend time, you have to do a lot of research on the partner. And somebody that has run the same type of business before as well,
What do you do, Brian?
Well, we developed a checklist of priority points that we would look for within a partner. I think top of the list for me is, first and foremost, experience of working together with a franchise brand, being a franchisee, being a licensee. Ideally in the F&B business, but not necessarily exclusively in the F&B business. I've had great franchisees that have come out of the automotive industry, be them the Mazda or the Honda or the Jaguar franchisee. I think I would also look for, licensed brand, F&B preferably. Retail real estate is absolutely critical. If they haven't got the competence, the skill set, the experience in analyzing locations, finding locations, and closing deals on locations, again, you're going to make an uphill battle, because without a location, you've got no business at the end of the day. And then come more softer things, such as people development, people motivating, being able to build a team and hold a team together. If they've got a track record like that, then you can start to think, and obviously then comes the financing, but financing...
Yeah, but do you like them also? You have to like them. You're getting in bed with them for, 15 or 20
Yep.
years.
Yep.
So my board made me writing a list how the ideal franchise partner look like, and
Okay, let's hear it.
I can read you out the list, but I don't believe in it, so I will not do it. Because I think at the end you have to feel it, and this person has to share the passion and the core value. And what I really never do is I never let them come in the office, and I never let them sit with a PowerPoint and present, because that's not the reality. We're not selling a PowerPoint presentation, we're selling a restaurant experience every day. So you have to put this person in this restaurant environment. So when somebody approaches us, we do 1 or 2 telephone interviews just to get a feeling, but the first reality check what we do, we put them 5 days in a restaurant, and there's no management, and I'm not there, and the board is not there. He's just there with the normal restaurant stuff. And at the end of these 5-6 days, we ask the staff how this person behaves, and it's very easy to make a nice appearance in 1 hour office presentation in front of the board. Everybody can look good if he's well prepared. But to be 5 days in a restaurant, I think you show your right face. You see how they treat other pianisti, so how they treat employees, how they handle guest complaint, how they touch food. Sometimes we have a great guy, but then you put him in the kitchen and he's not interacting with the food. You see, it's like he's not in love with the food. And then you see how they like the concept. After this, what is kind of an operational check, we travel to the market, because for us it's very important that they really understand the local market. And we also spend minimum 3 days there. So the last market what I signed was Colombia. So what is a very tricky market, I was there 2 times 3 days to really see, do the people know the other key player? Do they know the competition? Do they know the supply chain? Because if you have to help them setting that up, it's a nightmare. But you have to see it, you have to feel it, and in parallel you can check the market if the market is ready to go in. And that's why I said before, we take really our time, and we got 80 franchise requests a week. That's a lot. And we're signing a year 2 to 3 partners. So it's like really getting them filtered, but I think the one who have the long breath and who really go through all these steps, they are the right ones. And as you said before, they also have to be friends, I think, because you spend so much time with them and you hand over the brand to them, so they have to feel like a family, a piano family or Wagamama family, whatever.
And you were starting to talk about finance. I interrupted you.
And not just that they had sufficient finance to actually support. That was all. It was just it has to be there, doesn't it? But we also do what Mario was saying. We also have what we call orientation training, and it's you don't expect them to know anything. It's more behavioural. It's how they act, how they react. What are their expectations? Do they come fully dressed and expect to sit in the office and just look at numbers? Or are they really anxious to get their hands involved and really engage with the people? It gives you a good sense check of their interest in the business and in the brand.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice from our panel here. You have to look at the whole deal, not just one aspect, not just do that. Have the money, or sometimes you get real estate players who want to fill their shopping malls, but have they ever operated a restaurant before? Could be a disaster. One of my clients says, show me some of your existing units, and he just says, I walk in and I know immediately yes or no. Just how it looks, how it's run, staff happy, unhappy, dirty, clean, merchandising right or wrong. So those, I think, are some of the factors.
Also, one thing what we do, we don't give them a starting time in the first day. Because if you run a restaurant, they should know when a restaurant starts to operate. So they say, when should I come? And I say, you come on the beginning of the day. And when somebody shows up at 10 o'clock in the morning, I think that's already done. So it can go home again, because I think the ones they really feel what needs to be done in the restaurant, they are there at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, because they know when the prep work is starting. So you really have to have this operational experience. Because I think financing is very important. We check that obviously at the end, but I think the right operator will find the money. And the right person who can convince us to run the brand, he will convince a financial partner to give him the money at the end. So obviously you need to have the money, otherwise you struggle on the road and you don't need to do that. But I think that's, at least on our list, the last checkpoint before he signs, because it can be, and it happened a lot of time, that this operational person maybe only has 20-30%, but he finds the guy behind him who supports him. But the main contract is with the operational guy.
Yeah. Now we've got probably time for one more question, so I'm going to pick the different structural models of franchising. So obviously you can have a person who runs one unit, that's a unit franchisee, and they will have one location and that will be their entire focus. You can have an area developer, typically someone who will do an entire country for you and will commit to a certain number of openings over a period of time. You can have a master franchisee who will run a pilot and then sub-franchise. So you see that in countries like Russia, where there's primary cities, where everyone wants to invest, and there's places somewhere in Siberia where you might find a local Siberian guy to do it, but not a lot of taking from the big national groups. And then you can have, we just spoke briefly before we came on about cluster franchising, taking a per city approach in countries where maybe a whole country partner doesn't appear. So we were talking about Northwestern Europe as being more challenging for a whole country partner. So some of the coffee brands, for example, give a city to a person, and that person opens between 5 and 10 units in a city, and they have exclusivity in that city. So these are some of the options. Which options do you typically use, Brian?
Well, up until now, we've done territory franchises, single country territory franchises with a development agreement. So an understanding that you've got your territory, you've got to open a certain number of restaurants within a certain period of time. We refine that to actually even say, right, you've got to have X number in the capital city and X number within the secondary city, so to speak, to sort of get a balanced point of development. I'm personally not, and we don't do sub-franchising. I've had more negative experiences than I've had with positive experience of sub-franchising. And as far as multiple franchise marking, it's something we're looking at for some of the big Western European countries such as France, such as Germany, maybe Spain. We may find a franchisee for Madrid, we may find a franchisee for Barcelona, and one for the Costas, just to sort of allow us to grow with a level of speed, but in the absence of also a single entity that could cover the whole country for us.
Yeah, interesting. So, Val, what's your preferred model? Do you have a preference?
Well, sub-franching is definitely not a preference either. You know, the more middlemen you have, the less control you have over your brand and your product. But I think sometimes it depends on the area and the market and kind of what's available and what kind of partners you find. You know, have you found somebody that you want to be an area franchisor, or do you think you're just going to have to go with a per market? So sometimes there's a preferred strategy, but it really depends on the partners that you find out there.
So also, I think we all agree, no sub-franchising. We don't mix the franchisees in the country itself, so we only did that for historical reasons in Germany, but all the others is very clear, one country, one partner. What was our main lesson learned is if a partner is good in one country, it doesn't mean that he's good in the other. No. We did this mistake twice with really great partner in one country. We gave them another country to grow in and failed enormously and burned all the good money what they made in their home country in the other country. So now we are very strict in local networks. So even as a European, you look in this country cluster here and say it's all GCC, it's anyhow the same, we have one partner. We don't believe in that. So we have here in the region 4 partners. And I think it's very good because we have one specifically for Qatar who's doing a great job in Qatar, but who couldn't probably do Kuwait and vice versa. So I really think you have to look into the territory and define what do you need. And at the end, you need the local know-how and the network and the access to real estate and to a talent pool. And if we talk about Europe, I think for us it's quite obvious that I'm from Austria. As an Austrian, we don't have access to Hungarian real estate and Hungarian pool, and at the map it looks so close to each other, and somebody would maybe make the mistake, and the same mistake we're doing by looking into Middle East and looking into Southeast Asia. We say, okay, Jakarta, Singapore, Malaysia, anyhow it's the same, let's give it to one partner. It's not. So I really think that's one important learning, and that's the main and dangerous learning, if one guy is doing a great job in his home market, doesn't mean that he can grow in the market next door. We failed twice, and I hope we will not fail a third time because we will not do the same mistake again.
And then you have countries like China, which are extremely different from province to province, where it would be folly to go with one master franchisor. So
yeah, I agree. So maybe there are some potential examples. I hear about India, the same thing. That a guy who's from the north has no connections in the south and therefore cannot get any of the 31 permits you need. And so there could be, but these are the rules, the principles that people work by. And I'm looking at this clock that's ticking in front of my eyes. And if we want to take some questions, I think now is just a few minutes left for questions from the audience, if anyone would like to ask the panel anything. Please.
It's for Mario and Brian. Today you see everyone reducing their portions and increasing their prices quite a lot. Whereas I see Vapiano and Wagamama still maintaining the portions and keeping a good pricing there. Is your strategy low-cost leadership?
I missed the last bit. Is the strategy?
Low-cost leadership? Kind of you're differentiating yourself from others?
I think the philosophy is to be accessible to all. I wouldn't call it low cost, I'd call it value, but also accessible to all. That's really the principle that we try to work at in our menu pricing. We say give it maximum exposure to the maximum part of the relevant population.
Why haven't both of you expanded here?
Why haven't we expanded here? Well, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of history which we're slowly unpicking. It's a franchise market. The franchisee is probably the better person to answer that question. But I think we're turning the corner. There's a little bit of a new energy coming in, both within the franchisees organization, but also within the Wagamama organization. I think we were probably an unprepared franchising company in some respects back in the day. We did a good job with what we did, but we're probably not totally prepared.
And the same with
So the pricing question is easy. One of our core principles is price value. So we spend a lot of money around the year on price research and positioning. And we are pretty strict if we feel that our partners go too high, because we feel that Vapiano should be a food for daily use. So you should walk by and feel kind of hungry and say, okay, let's have a pasta and pizza. And it should be very affordable. Affordable means in every country something different. So in Germany, our average check is €9.50, what is affordable in Germany. In Sweden, our average check is €17.50, and in Australia, it's $21.50. So, but we try to be strict. We try to be around 20% below a full-service Italian restaurant with a similar quality. That's kind of the positioning. And for us, it's very important because we believe in Vapiano, it's all about guest count. So we want to have a Vapiano 600-700 guests a day, otherwise it doesn't feel right because it needs to be a vibrant piazza. So even if somebody makes with 300 guests the same sales, we don't really like to do that. And that's one of these core beliefs we like to share. So we like to have 600-700 guests a day with this average check.
Thank you. I see the success of both the restaurants.
Right, we're sort of down on the time. If there's one more question, we'll take it. Otherwise,
So
yes.
a
Can't see very well with the
question
lights
on
in my face.
question on valuation and purchase. I heard for a franchisee, there's a risk of you guys, and this has happened often. A private equity firm takes over, and I believe in most area development agreements, the brand has the right to buy out the franchisee. How do you do the valuation? So suppose you have a franchise for one of your brands in country X. How do you get agreement between the guy that's built that country up and the value of that brand? The flip side of that question is, suppose you have a franchisee in a country who is part of a bigger group. They're a holding company and they want to IPO and go to a public market, and your brand is one of a basket of brands that they own in country X. Is that allowed, and is there any limitation on that? So you buying them or them floating themselves?
So for us, it's pretty easy. We don't have a right to buy them out. We can negotiate, and we did several times, but it's a market value. So there's no clause in there what makes us letting them buy out. The only thing what we have at bigger countries, we start with the franchising, and we have a joint venture option, as we call it. So we agree on an EBITDA price that after 3 years we can opt in, buying 50% maximum and continue with the joint venture. It's a very successful model because if a country is bigger, the franchise partner needs maybe more access to capital later on when there is a proven business model. So it's a win-win situation because the franchisee takes the risk in the beginning and proves the business model locally, but then when he needs access to money, he gets cheap money because it's a 50-50 joint venture. And the other question is we don't sign with enterprises or corporation, we only sign with individuals and they cannot IPO. So that's that advantage. So if they want to put it into a holding, they have to get our approval, and we never do that. So we sign only with individuals or group of individuals, so we don't have the risk.
We have a preemption right on purchase on the back of a transaction that the franchisee has already effectively progressed. So we have an option to be able to match the price within a decision period of, say, 10 days or so. The IPO piece, whilst not as far as Wagamama is concerned in a previous life, again, we had to be involved because it obviously involved a change in shareholder. So we had to at least give a written approval to the intent to list.
I agree, that's what you would commonly find is change of control would trigger an approval process because the franchisor handpicks each franchisee in accordance with all these things we've just heard about, and to just have that replaced by a private equity firm is usually a challenging proposition. So there will not be an automatic right to do that in any franchise agreement I have ever seen. I've seen tag and drag along rights both ways, and so if you're still negotiating, you may want to consider or preparing something like that. That's a way to tie in the franchisor. If you're cashing in on the value, they'll get a share, and the other way around. But this is unusual. It's not the standard. Did you want to comment any more on that? It's quite a very technical question. And I think with that interesting remark, I am going to leave it for this panel and introduce the next group of people. So thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Babette.